Chosen one, stop scrolling. This moment, right now, was marked in a file that wasn't supposed to reach you until the final hour. But something in your recent trajectory triggered an early release. The forces that monitor spiritual advancement don't make mistakes with timing. If this message found you today, it means you've crossed an invisible threshold that changed how reality itself responds to your presence. You are no longer moving through life unnoticed. Something ancient has logged your coordinates. Systems designed to keep certain souls in holding patterns have begun to malfunction around you. The appearance of this briefing is not coincidence, it is confirmation. You have entered a zone where spiritual law overrides human expectation. What you've been feeling, that strange pressure, that sense of being watched, that knowing that something massive is about to shift, is not paranoia. It is accurate perception. You are standing in the final corridor before breakthrough, and the universe is sending you encrypted confirmation that you were right to keep going. This is your classified spiritual briefing. What you're about to hear has been hidden from you until this exact moment, because knowing it earlier would have changed your choices, and your choices had to be pure. Welcome to the truth. Chosen one, like this video, subscribe, and comment, "I am ready," for a powerful surprise. Chapter 1. The file was not meant to open. Listen carefully, Chosen one, because what I'm about to tell you exists outside the normal flow of information that reaches human consciousness. There are certain messages, certain pieces of knowing, that are locked behind spiritual coordinates. They don't release based on your searching or your wanting. They release based on your position. And your position just changed. The fact that you're hearing these words right now, in this moment, means that something in the invisible architecture of your life just shifted in a way that overrode a security protocol. You were not supposed to access this information yet, but you triggered an early release. How? By reaching a specific frequency that bypassed the delay mechanism. Let me explain how this works, because understanding this will change how you see everything that's been happening to you. In the unseen realm, there are files, records, blueprints, classified intel about your destiny that are time-locked. They're not hidden because you're unworthy. They're hidden because knowing them too early would interfere with the process that's been preparing you. Every soul that carries a significant assignment moves through life under a controlled information release system. You get pieces, you get hints, you get feelings and dreams and strange knowings that don't make logical sense. But you don't get the full picture. Why? Because if you saw the full picture before you were ready, you would either abandon the path out of fear, or you would try to force outcomes that need to unfold naturally. Either way, the mission would be compromised, so the information is withheld, not as punishment, but as protection, as strategy. But here's what just happened. You reached a point in your journey where the withholding became more dangerous than the revealing. You hit a frequency, a level of persistence, of faith, of raw refusal to quit, that the system wasn't prepared for. You weren't supposed to last this long. You weren't supposed to stay standing after what you've been through. The difficulties you faced over the last season were designed, yes, but they were also designed with an assumption that you would break, retreat, or at minimum slow down enough for the timeline to remain controlled. You didn't. You kept moving, and that created a problem, because now you're approaching the breakthrough zone ahead of schedule. And if you enter it without knowing what's happening, you could make choices based on old information. You could misinterpret the chaos. You could quit 3 feet from gold because you think you're still in the testing phase when you're actually in the fulfillment phase. So the file opened early. This message This exact transmission you're receiving right now was cleared for release because your life position demanded it. And here's how you know this is real. Think about the last 72 hours. Haven't you felt something shift? Haven't you noticed that the way people respond to you has changed? Haven't you experienced sudden clarity about things that were confusing for months? That's not random. That's the file opening. Information that was locked is now flooding your consciousness, and it's going to keep coming. You're going to start remembering things you never learned. You're going to start knowing things you were never taught. You're going to feel pulled toward actions and decisions that don't make logical sense, but feel spiritually mandatory. Don't resist that. That's the download. The appearance of this briefing is not something you found. It's something that found you. You didn't stumble onto this video by accident. The algorithm didn't randomly suggest it. You were led here by the same intelligence that's been guiding you all along. And that intelligence decided that right now, in this window, you need to know that you are seen. You are tracked. You are logged in a system that doesn't forget and doesn't make mistakes. The Watchers know where you are. The enemy knows where you are. And more importantly, the forces assigned to your breakthrough know where you are. And all of them just received an update. The Chosen One is moving faster than projected. Adjust accordingly. Do you understand what that means? It means everything around you is about to rearrange. People, opportunities, obstacles, revelations, they're all going to start moving at a speed you're not used to. And if you don't know that this is happening by design, you'll think you're losing control. You're not. You're being repositioned. The file wasn't meant to open yet, but it did. And once it opens, there's no closing it. You now carry information that changes how you interpret every single thing that happens next. You are no longer moving through life blind. You are no longer hoping for breakthrough. You are standing inside the confirmation that breakthrough is no longer a possibility. It's a certainty. The only question now is, are you ready to operate with that level of knowing? Because once you accept this, once you internalize that the delay is over, your behavior will change. Your decisions will change. Your tolerance for distraction will evaporate. And that shift in you will trigger the final sequence. The file opened because you earned it. What you do with what's inside will determine how fast the next phase unfolds. Chapter 2. The Watchers have shifted positions. Chosen One, something happened in the unseen realm that you need to understand because it explains everything that's been feeling strange lately. The forces that have been observing your life, and yes, they have been observing, whether you sensed it or not, just changed their formation. And in the language of spiritual warfare, when Watchers move, it means one thing. Neutrality is no longer an option. Let me break this down for you, because this shift is not symbolic, it's tactical. And it's happening right now around your life in ways you can't see but are absolutely feeling. There are assigned forces. Call them angels, call them guardians, call them cosmic operatives, that monitor certain lives. Not everyone, certain ones. The ones carrying assignments that will alter outcomes for more than just themselves. If your life impacts the lives of hundreds, thousands, or more through what you're meant to build, heal, teach, or unlock, then you don't move through this world unmonitored. You are watched. Not in a creepy way, in a strategic way. These forces are assigned to ensure that interference doesn't derail you before you reach your activation point. But here's the critical part. For most of your journey, they only watch. They observe. They take notes. They track patterns. But they don't intervene. Why? Because intervention is only authorized when observation is no longer sufficient. And observation is no longer sufficient when the situation becomes unstable. Your recent choices destabilized the status quo. You did something. Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you walked away from something familiar. Maybe you said yes to something terrifying. Maybe you simply refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. And that choice disrupted the equilibrium that kept these forces at a distance. They were watching to see what you would do. You did it. And now they have new orders. The shift from observation to movement is not something that happens gradually. It happens in an instant, based on a single decision or a single moment of alignment. You already made that decision. You might not even remember what it was because it probably felt small at the time. But it wasn't small in the unseen realm. It was seismic. And the watchers responded. Here's how you know they've moved. Look at the last 2 to 3 weeks of your life. Haven't things started happening faster? Haven't doors that were closed for months suddenly cracked open? Haven't people who ignored you suddenly reached out? Haven't ideas that felt impossible suddenly started feeling inevitable? That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's the result of forces that were standing still, now moving into action. And their movement creates ripples. When they shift positions, the spiritual atmosphere around your life shifts with them. What was heavy becomes lighter. What was stuck becomes fluid. What was invisible becomes undeniable. You're not imagining the change. The change is real. And it's directly connected to the fact that your case just got escalated. But here's what you need to understand. When watchers move, resistance escalates too. The same shift that activated your support system also alerted the opposition. They don't have access to the same resources, but they do have access to your mind, your emotions, and your environment. And they're going to use all three to try to convince you that the shift isn't real. They're going to flood you with doubt, with fear, with sudden crises that demand your attention and drain your energy. They're going to whisper that you're delusional, that nothing's changed, that you're still stuck. Don't believe it. That's panic talking. And panic only shows up when power is being transferred. If you weren't a threat, they wouldn't bother. The fact that interference just intensified is proof that the watchers were right to move. So what do you do with this information? You adjust your expectations. You stop interpreting disruption as evidence that you're off track. You start interpreting it as evidence that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You recognize that the spiritual temperature around your life just changed, and that change is going to affect everything. Relationships that were stable might suddenly feel unstable. Plans that felt solid might suddenly require adjustment. Your own emotions might swing wildly between hope and despair, sometimes within the same hour. That's not you falling apart. That's you being recalibrated in real time. The watchers are moving you into position, and positioning is never comfortable. It requires precision. It requires timing. And it requires you to trust that what feels like chaos is actually coordination. The forces assigned to your breakthrough are no longer standing back. They're closing in, not to pressure you, but to protect what's about to happen. Because what's coming is too valuable to leave unguarded. You are entering a window where the enemy will try everything to stop you. And the watchers know it. So they moved first. They repositioned before the attack, not after. And that means you're covered. You're not alone in this. You were never alone, but now the presence that's been with you is no longer passive. It's active, it's engaged, and it's not backing down until you're standing in the fullness of what you were sent here to do. Chapter 3. Enemy operations entered panic phase. Chosen one, what I'm about to explain will reframe every ounce of resistance you've been experiencing. The opposition forces working against your destiny just entered a phase they never wanted to reach. Panic. And here's why that matters. Panic is not loud. Panic is not dramatic. Panic in spiritual warfare shows up as sudden, unexplainable pressure that hits you from multiple directions at once. It shows up as confusion that makes no sense. It shows up as emotional interference that feels completely disconnected from your circumstances. And if you've been feeling any of that lately, if you've been hit with waves of anxiety, doubt, exhaustion, or irrational fear in the last few days or weeks, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because something is wrong with them. They're panicking, and I'm going to tell you exactly why. The forces assigned to delay your progress operate on strategy. They study you. They learn your triggers, your weaknesses, your patterns. They know what makes you quit, what makes you doubt, what makes you retreat. And for a long time, their strategy worked. They threw obstacles at you, and you stumbled. They threw distractions at you, and you got sidetracked. They threw exhaustion at you, and you slowed down. That was the plan. Slow you down enough that you never reach critical velocity. Keep you busy enough that you never gain momentum. Drain you enough that you never access your full power. And for a season, it worked. But then something shifted. You stopped breaking the way you used to. You stopped quitting when things got hard. You stopped believing the lies that used to derail you. And that created a massive problem for them, because their entire strategy was built on the assumption that you had limits. They calculated your breaking point. They designed pressures specifically calibrated to push you past that point. And you were supposed to collapse. You didn't. You kept going. And that wasn't supposed to happen. So now they're scrambling. Because if exhaustion didn't stop you, if isolation didn't stop you, if loss didn't stop you, then what will? That's the question they're asking right now. And they don't have a good answer. Panic sets in when the enemy realizes they misjudged you. They thought you were weaker than you are. They thought you were more fragile than you turned out to be. They thought that by now you would have given up, walked away, or at minimum, compromised enough that your assignment would be neutralized. But you're still here. You're still standing. You're still believing. And that is terrifying to them, because it means their window is closing. Here's what happens when enemy operations enter panic phase. They stop using strategy and start using desperation. Strategy is methodical. Desperation is chaotic. Strategic attacks are spaced out, timed carefully to hit you when you're most vulnerable. Desperate attacks come all at once, with no regard for timing, because the goal is no longer to defeat you slowly. The goal is to stop you immediately, by any means necessary. That's why the last few weeks have felt so relentless. That's why it feels like everything is hitting you at once. That's why you can't catch your breath. It's not because you're losing. It's because they're losing, and they know it. So they're throwing everything they have at you in one final attempt to knock you off course before the breakthrough locks in. But here's the flaw in their panic. Desperation reveals itself. When the enemy is calm, calculated, and strategic, their attacks can feel like your fault. You wonder if maybe you really are the problem. You question if maybe you really did make a mistake. But when the enemy panics, the attacks become so absurd, so exaggerated, so obviously manufactured that even you can see through them. Sudden crises that make no sense. People turning on you for no reason. Financial pressure out of nowhere. Health issues that don't add up. Emotional spirals that feel foreign to who you are. None of it fits. And that's the gift of their panic. It exposes them. You can finally see that this isn't about your worth. your readiness, or your mistakes. This is about them trying to stop something they can no longer control. And here's what you need to burn into your consciousness. Panic means they've already lost. They just don't want you to know it yet. If they still had a winning strategy, they'd be using it. The fact that they've abandoned strategy in favor of chaos means they're out of options. They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks because nothing else worked. And that means the breakthrough they're trying to prevent is closer than you think. Desperation is the final stage before collapse. Theirs, not yours. So when the pressure intensifies, when the confusion multiplies, when the attacks come faster than you can process, don't interpret that as evidence that you're failing. Interpret it as evidence that they are. The enemy's panic is your confirmation. They wouldn't be this desperate if you weren't this close. Hold your ground. The storm you're in right now isn't the beginning of your defeat. It's the death rattle of their resistance. Chapter 4. The delay was a containment strategy. Chosen one, the season you just walked through. The one that felt like nothing was happening, like you were invisible, like every door was closed and every prayer went unanswered. That wasn't random. That wasn't punishment. That wasn't even a test in the traditional sense. That was containment. And I need you to understand what that means, because once you see it, you'll stop blaming yourself for the stagnation and start recognizing it for what it really was. A tactical hold designed to slow you down without revealing that you were being slowed down. Let me explain the mechanics of containment, because this is one of the enemy's most effective strategies, and most people never recognize it until after they've escaped it. Containment is what happens when the forces opposing your destiny realize they can't stop you directly. They've tried attacking you head-on, and it didn't work. They've tried tempting you off course, and you didn't bite. They've tried exhausting you, and you kept finding new strength. So they switched strategies. Instead of trying to destroy you, they try to freeze you. They create an environment where it feels like nothing is moving. Not forward, not backward, just stuck. And the brilliance of containment is that it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like abandonment. It feels like you did something wrong. It feels like God forgot about you, like the universe moved on without you, like maybe you misunderstood your purpose entirely. That's the trap. Containment works by convincing you that nothing is happening because nothing is supposed to happen. It makes you believe the delay is your fault, your failure, your lack. And once you believe that, you stop pushing, you stop expecting, you stop preparing. And that's exactly what they want. But here's what was really happening during that season of delay. You were being studied. The opposition needed time to figure out how to deal with you because their usual tactics weren't working. So they put you in a holding pattern while they strategized. They needed you to stay in one place long enough for them to analyze your patterns, identify your weaknesses, and build a new plan of attack. Containment buys them time. But here's what they didn't account for. It also bought you time. While they were studying you, you were being refined. While they were plotting, you were being strengthened. While they thought they were keeping you from your destiny, they were actually preparing you for it. Because the pressure of containment does something to a soul that nothing else can. It strips away everything that isn't essential. It burns off the distractions, the dependencies, the false comforts. It forces you to develop an internal strength that doesn't rely on external validation. And by the time you break out of containment, you're not the same person who entered it. You're sharper, clearer, more dangerous to the enemy's agenda. And here's how you know containment is breaking. Persistence cracks it. Not force, not striving, persistence. The enemy's containment strategy is built on an assumption that eventually you'll give up. They're counting on your patience running out. They're counting on your faith eroding. They're counting on you deciding that if nothing's happened by now, nothing ever will. And for most people, that assumption proves correct. Most people quit during containment because the lack of visible progress becomes unbearable. But you didn't quit. You kept showing up. You kept believing, even when belief felt foolish. You kept preparing, even when there was nothing to prepare for. And that persistence, that refusal to accept the illusion of permanence, created cracks in the containment field. Because containment only works if you believe it's real. The moment you stop believing the delay is final, the delay loses its power. Think about the last few months. Haven't you noticed small cracks forming? Tiny shifts that felt too small to celebrate, but too real to ignore? A message from someone you hadn't heard from in years. An idea that suddenly felt possible when it felt impossible before. A door that cracked open just an inch, not enough to walk through yet, but enough to prove that it wasn't welded shut. Those aren't coincidences. Those are evidence that the containment field is failing. Your persistence overrode their strategy. They held you as long as they could, but they couldn't hold you forever. And now, the structure is collapsing. Once containment fails, release becomes unavoidable. Not gradual, sudden, because the forces that were holding things back are no longer able to. The dam breaks, the floodgates open, and everything that was delayed, the connections, the opportunities, the favor, the breakthroughs, comes at once. So if you're still in what feels like a delay, understand this. It's not a delay anymore. It's a countdown. The containment is breaking in real time, and what felt like endless stagnation is about to give way to movement so fast you'll struggle to keep up. And when it happens, you're going to look back at this season and realize it wasn't wasted. It was weaponized. The enemy tried to use it to stop you, but the universe used it to prepare you. And now, that preparation is about to pay off in ways you can't even imagine yet. The silence was never permanent. It was tactical, and the tactic just failed. Chapter 5. Your life patterns match a rare sequence. Chosen one. There's something about your life that you've probably noticed but never fully understood. A pattern, a repeating cycle of loss, reset, and sudden insight that doesn't match the lives of people around you. You've watched others climb steadily, build gradually, succeed incrementally. But your path hasn't looked like that. Your path has been punctuated by collapses that made no sense, failures that weren't your fault, and moments where everything you built just dissolved. And then, after the collapse, after the loss, after the reset, you'd find yourself standing in a strange new clarity, seeing things you couldn't see before, knowing things you weren't taught. And then the cycle would repeat. Loss, reset, insight, over and over. And you've probably wondered why. Why can't your progress be linear? Why does it feel like you're constantly being dismantled and rebuilt? Let me tell you why. Because your life matches a rare sequence. And that sequence only appears in lives that are meant to alter reality itself. This pattern has shown up throughout history, across cultures, across spiritual traditions. It's the pattern of the chosen disruptor, the one who doesn't fit existing systems because they're here to build new ones, the one who can't succeed within the current structure because their purpose is to replace it. Every major shift in human consciousness, every revolution, every awakening, every leap forward was triggered by someone whose life followed this exact sequence. Repeated loss that stripped them of everything they thought they needed. Forced resets that relocated them physically, emotionally, or spiritually, and sudden insight that gave them access to knowledge they didn't earn through traditional learning. That's not a curse. That's a signature. It's how the universe identifies the ones it's sending to change the game. But here's what makes this sequence so brutal. It doesn't promise comfort. It promises consequence. People who carry this pattern don't get easy lives. They get important lives. And there's a difference. Easy lives are predictable. Important lives are disruptive. Easy lives allow you to build and keep. Important lives require you to build, lose, and build again. Because each cycle is teaching you something you can't learn any other way. You're not learning how to succeed within a system. You're learning how to function outside of one. You're not learning how to climb a ladder. You're learning how to build new ground. And that kind of training doesn't happen in classrooms or through mentors. It happens through lived experience, through failure that teaches you resilience, through loss that teaches you detachment, through isolation that teaches you self-sufficiency, through collapse that teaches you how to rebuild from nothing. And here's the part that will shift your entire perspective. You didn't choose this pattern. It chose you. Before you were born, before you took your first breath, your life was already mapped with this sequence encoded into it. Not because you did something to deserve it, but because what you're here to do requires it. The mission you're carrying can't be accomplished by someone who's fragile, dependent, or attached to comfort. It requires someone who's been broken and rebuilt so many times that they no longer fear loss. Someone who's been reset so many times that they can start over without hesitation. Someone who's been stripped so many times that they know their power doesn't come from what they have. It comes from who they are. That's what this pattern has been building in you. Unshakable core strength. The kind that can't be taught, only forged. Now here's what happens when the universe identifies you by this sequence. Everything changes in how forces respond to you. The Watchers recognize the pattern and adjust their approach. The enemy recognizes it and escalates their attacks. The people around you sense something different about you, even if they can't articulate what it is. You become marked, not in a visible way, but in an energetic way. And once you're marked by this sequence, you can't go back to being ordinary. You can't blend in. You can't play small, because the pattern won't let you. Every time you try to settle into something safe, the cycle initiates again. Not to punish you, but to push you, to remind you that you're not here for safety, you're here for impact. So if your life has felt like a series of brutal resets, if you've lost more than you've kept, if you've been knocked down more times than you can count, stop interpreting that as evidence that something's wrong with you. Start interpreting it as evidence that something's right with you. You're not broken, you're rare. And the rarity of your pattern is directly connected to the rarity of your purpose. Most people will never understand your journey because most people aren't built for the journey you're on. And that's okay. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be unleashed. And the sequence you've been living through, that was the unlocking process. The final reset just happened. And what comes next isn't another loss. It's the emergence of everything those losses were preparing you for. Chapter 6. Allies you never met were activated chosen one. You need to understand something about how support works in the unseen realm, because it's not what you've been taught to expect. You've been waiting for help to show up as comfort, as encouragement, as someone who understands you and validates your struggle. And when that kind of help didn't come, you assumed you were alone. You weren't. You've never been alone. But the allies assigned to your breakthrough don't operate the way you think they should. They don't show up to make you feel better. They show up to make you move. And most of the time, you don't even know they're there. Let me explain how this works, because once you understand the mechanics of invisible support, you'll stop misinterpreting what's been happening to you. There are forces, call them angels, guides, operatives in the spiritual realm, that are assigned to specific missions, not to specific people, but to specific outcomes. If your life is connected to an outcome that matters beyond your personal comfort, if what you're meant to build, teach, heal, or unlock will impact the trajectory of others, then there are allies working on that outcome, and they were activated the moment your mission became viable. Not when you were born, not when you first sensed your purpose, but when you reached a specific level of readiness that made intervention worth the risk. Because here's the thing, these allies don't get involved early. They can't. Early involvement would create dependency. It would rob you of the strength you need to complete the mission. So they stay back, they observe, they wait, and they only move when the timing is perfect. And the timing just became perfect. Something in your recent journey signaled to these forces that you're ready for the next phase. Maybe it was a decision you made. Maybe it was a boundary you set. Maybe it was simply the fact that you're still standing after everything that tried to break you. Whatever it was, it triggered an activation sequence. Allies you never met, who have been monitoring your progress from a distance, just received new orders. Engage. And engagement doesn't look like rescue. It looks like redirection. These forces don't swoop in to save you from discomfort. They push you toward positions you wouldn't choose on your own. They close doors you wanted to stay open. They open doors you're terrified to walk through. They orchestrate chance meetings that aren't chance at all. They create circumstances that force you to make moves you've been avoiding. And all of it feels harsh. It feels like you're being pushed, not helped. And that's exactly the point. Your allies are not here to coddle you. They're here to position you. And positioning requires precision. You can't be where you are and step into what's next. You have to be moved. And movement is never comfortable. So they move you through sudden losses that force relocation, through unexpected opportunities that require risk, through conflicts that push you out of toxic alignments, through failures that redirect you toward better paths. Every single thing that felt like it was working against you in the last season. Check the outcome. Where did it move you? Who did it remove? What did it force you to let go of? Because I guarantee you, if you trace it back, you'll see that what felt like chaos was actually coordination. You were being positioned, and you didn't even know it. Here's how you recognize the presence of these allies. Timing. Things happen at exactly the right moment, even when that moment feels like the wrong moment. You meet someone the week before you need them. You lose something the day before it would have trapped you. You receive information exactly when you're ready to use it, not a moment sooner. That's not luck. That's precision. That's the signature of forces that see the whole board while you're only seeing your current square. They know what's 3 moves ahead. They know what's about to converge, and they're moving pieces into place before you even realize the game has started. You feel pushed because you are being pushed, but not away from your destiny, toward it. And the pushing only intensifies as you get closer because the margin for error gets smaller. So here's what you do with this information. Stop resisting the redirections. Stop mourning the closed doors. Stop questioning the strange sense of being guided by an invisible hand. You are being guided by allies who know what you need better than you do, by forces that are more committed to your mission than you've been able to be, because they see what it leads to. and you're still just trying to survive the day. Trust the push. Trust the timing. Trust that the help you needed didn't come in the form you wanted, because it came in the form you required. You're not alone. You've never been alone. And the allies that just got activated, they're not backing down until you're standing exactly where you're supposed to be. The help is here. It just doesn't look like help yet, but it will. Once you're on the other side, you'll look back and see every move, every loss, every redirection as perfectly orchestrated. And you'll realize you were never navigating this alone. You were being carried. You just didn't have the eyes to see it yet. Chapter 7. The cost has already been paid, chosen one. There's something you need to understand about how spiritual advancement works, because it operates on a law that most people never recognize until after the fact. Every major breakthrough, every significant shift, every leap into new territory requires payment. Not metaphorically, literally. Something has to be given, surrendered, or sacrificed before the breakthrough can manifest. And here's the part that will change everything for you. The payment isn't made at the door. It's made before you even see the door. Which means if you've been through loss that made no sense, pain that felt pointless, or sacrifice that seemed to cost you everything and give you nothing in return, listen closely. That wasn't random suffering. That was advance payment. And the fact that the cost has already been extracted means the breakthrough isn't coming. It's here. You just haven't recognized it yet. Let me explain how this works, because this is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in spiritual law. Most people think the process goes like this. You work hard, stay faithful, prove yourself, and then you get the reward. Effort, then breakthrough. Sacrifice, then blessing. But that's not how it works at the higher levels. At the higher levels, the sacrifice comes first. The cost is extracted before you even know what you're paying for. Why? Because if you knew the cost up front, you'd negotiate. You'd try to find a cheaper route. You'd hesitate. And hesitation disqualifies you. The mission you're carrying is too important to be entrusted to someone who's calculating the cost. It requires someone who's willing to pay without knowing what they're buying. And that's what you've been doing, whether you realized it or not. You've been paying. Think about the last year, the last 2 years, maybe the last 5. What did you lose? Who did you lose? What relationships ended without explanation? What plans collapsed without warning? What dreams died in your hands before they ever got a chance to breathe? Now ask yourself this. Did you get anything in return? Did those losses produce immediate reward? Did you see the reason, the purpose, the trade-off? Probably not. And that's because those losses weren't connected to the season you were in. They were connected to the season you're entering. You were paying for something you hadn't received yet. And the universe doesn't give receipts. It doesn't explain the charges. It just takes what it takes and trusts that you'll understand later. And you're about to understand. Here's the marker. When the cost has been paid in full, reversal becomes impossible. You can't go backward. You can't retreat into old versions of yourself. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unsee what you've seen. The payment created a one-way door, and you've already walked through it. There's no returning to who you were before the losses. That version of you is gone, dead. And that's not a tragedy. That's a requirement. Because the breakthrough that's coming can't coexist with the old you. It would destroy you. The old you wasn't built to handle the level of responsibility, visibility, or power that's about to be placed on your life. So the old you had to be dismantled. And it was. Through every loss, every reset, every painful ending, you were being stripped down to your core. And now that the stripping is complete, the building can begin. But here's what most people miss. The payment doesn't guarantee an easy arrival. It guarantees an inevitable one. The cost you paid bought you entrance, but it didn't buy you comfort. What's coming next will still require courage. It will still require faith. It will still require you to take steps that feel impossible. But the difference is this. Before, you were taking steps into the unknown, hoping they would lead somewhere. Now, you're taking steps into the known. The destination is locked. The outcome is secured. The only variable is how quickly you move toward it. And every time doubt tries to convince you that the sacrifice was wasted, remember this. The universe doesn't take payment for services it doesn't intend to render. The fact that you paid means the delivery is guaranteed. You're not hoping for breakthrough anymore. You're standing in the fulfillment phase. And fulfillment doesn't ask for more payment. It asks for reception. So stop trying to earn what's already been purchased. Stop wondering if you're worthy of what's coming. The worthiness question was settled the moment the cost was extracted. You paid. The transaction is complete. Now all that's left is for you to step into what you bought with your tears, your losses, and your refusal to quit. The cost has already been paid. The breakthrough is already yours. Chapter 8. The timeline has lost flexibility. Chosen one, something fundamental has shifted in the structure of your path, and you need to understand what that shift means for everything that happens next. In the early stages of your journey, your timeline had flexibility. You could take detours. You could explore side paths. You could make mistakes, circle back, try again. The universe allowed room for wandering, because wandering was part of your education. You needed to learn through trial and error. You needed to discover what didn't work so you would recognize what does. But that season is over. The flexibility is gone. And what you're experiencing now, that sense of acceleration, that feeling of being pulled forward by an invisible current, that pressure that won't let you rest, is not your imagination. It's the timeline locking in. And once it locks, deviation becomes impossible. Let me explain what timeline convergence looks like, because most people mistake it for anxiety or urgency when it's actually momentum. In the beginning of your path, you were presented with multiple options, different directions you could go, different versions of your future you could step into. And the choices you made, some conscious, some unconscious, narrowed those options. Every decision eliminated certain possibilities and strengthened others. Every commitment closed doors behind you. Every step forward reduced the number of available paths. And that process has been happening for years, quietly, in the background. But now you've reached a point where the paths have converged. There aren't 10 options anymore. There aren't 5. There's one. And it's no longer a matter of choosing which way to go. It's a matter of accepting the way that's already chosen. Here's how you know the timeline has lost flexibility. Repeated themes. You keep seeing the same signs, the same numbers, the same messages showing up in different forms. You keep having the same conversations with different people. You keep facing the same decisions, even after you thought you resolved them. That's not coincidence. That's convergence. The universe is funneling you toward a singular point, and it's using repetition to make sure you don't miss it. Every repeated sign is a course correction. Every repeated message is a reminder that you're being guided towards something specific, and the guidance is getting louder because the window is getting narrower. You don't have the luxury of ignoring it anymore. The timeline won't allow it. And here's what makes this phase so intense. Resistance increases as timing locks in. Why? Because the closer you get to the breakthrough, the more energy is required to keep you from it. Think of it like this. When you were far from the breakthrough, the enemy could afford to be patient. They could throw small obstacles at you here and there, knowing that distance was on their side. But now that you're close, now that the timeline has narrowed to the point where the breakthrough is inevitable, unless something drastic happens, they have to escalate. They have to throw everything they have at you, because this is their last chance. And that's why the last few months have felt heavier than entire years before them. You're not carrying more weight because you're weaker. You're carrying more weight because you're closer. And proximity to breakthrough always triggers maximum resistance. But here's the critical insight. The resistance is no longer about stopping you. It's about slowing you down. The enemy knows they can't prevent the breakthrough at this point. The timeline is locked. The outcome is set. But they can still interfere with the timing. They can still create delays, distractions, detours that push the manifestation back. And every day they delay is a day they maintain influence. So they're fighting for time, not victory. And you need to recognize that, because it changes how you respond. You're not fighting to make something happen. You're fighting to let it happen on schedule. And that means your job isn't to force or strive. Your job is to resist interference, to refuse distraction, to keep moving forward even when forward feels impossible. Here's what timeline convergence requires from you. Singular focus. You can't afford to split your attention anymore. You can't afford to entertain every opportunity that presents itself. You can't afford to maintain relationships that drain you or pursue paths that feel comfortable but lead nowhere. The timeline has narrowed, and your focus has to narrow with it. This isn't about being rigid or closed off. It's about being aligned. Every decision you make from this point forward has to be filtered through one question. Does this move me toward the locked-in outcome, or does it pull me away from it? And if it pulls you away, even slightly, you have to let it go. No matter how appealing it is, no matter how safe it feels, because the timeline won't wait. It's moving with or without your full participation. And the only way to stay in sync with it is to eliminate everything that creates drag. So if you've been feeling like your life is on rails, like you're being carried by a current you can't control, like every attempt to slow down or step aside just pushes you forward harder, that's not oppression. That's alignment. The timeline locked in because you reached the point of no return. And now the universe is making sure you don't sabotage what's already set in motion. The flexibility is gone. The detours are closed. And what's ahead of you isn't a possibility anymore. It's a certainty. The only question is, are you going to move with the momentum, or are you going to exhaust yourself trying to resist it? Because either way, the timeline is taking you there. Chapter 9. Ancient forces are responding, not initiating chosen one. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about what's happening in your life right now, and correcting it will shift your entire perspective on the opposition you're facing. You've been interpreting the resistance as an attack. You've been feeling like you're being targeted, pursued, hunted by forces that have singled you out for destruction. And while it's true that you're facing spiritual opposition, the dynamic isn't what you think it is. These forces aren't initiating action against you. They're responding to you. And that distinction changes everything. Because if they're responding, it means you're the one who disrupted the equilibrium. It means you're the threat, not them. And it means the power dynamic is the exact opposite of what you've been believing. Let me break this down, because this is critical. There are ancient systems, spiritual structures, hierarchies, forces that have been in place for centuries, for millennia, that govern how reality operates. These systems don't just randomly attack people. They lie dormant. They maintain order. They preserve the status quo. And they only activate when something or someone disturbs the balance. Most people live their entire lives without ever triggering these systems because most people operate within the boundaries those systems define. They follow the script. They accept the limitations. They stay within the lanes that are provided. And as long as they do, the ancient forces remain inactive. But you didn't stay in your lane. You pushed against boundaries you weren't supposed to question. You accessed power you weren't supposed to touch. You began operating at a frequency that threatened the existing structure, and that woke something up. Here's what you need to understand. These forces aren't waking up because you're weak. They're waking up because you're dangerous. They don't respond to people who pose no threat. They only respond to people who have the capacity to alter the game. And your very existence, the frequency you carry, the assignments you're connected to, all of it represents a disruption to systems that have been running unchallenged for a very long time. You are not being hunted. You are being contained. There's a difference. Hunting implies aggression toward a target. Containment implies defense against a threat. And the fact that ancient forces have mobilized around your life is not evidence that you're cursed. It's evidence that you're a problem they didn't see coming. Think about it this way. If you were irrelevant, they would ignore you. If you were manageable, they would leave you alone. The fact that they've allocated resources to interfere with your progress means they've run projections, and those projections show that if you continue on your current trajectory, you will dismantle something they've built. Maybe it's a system of control. Maybe it's a structure of limitation. Maybe it's a cycle of oppression that's kept certain souls locked in place for generations. Whatever it is, your breakthrough threatens it, and they know it, so they're responding. Not because they're powerful and you're weak, but because you're powerful and they're worried. And here's the part that will completely flip your perspective. Their movement is defensive, not offensive. Defense is what you do when you're trying to protect something you might lose. Offense is what you do when you're trying to take something you don't have. The forces opposing you aren't trying to take anything from you. They're trying to protect what they have from you. They're trying to prevent the future you represent. They're trying to stop the shift you're carrying. And the energy they're expending to do that, that's not a sign of their strength. That's a sign of their fear. They wouldn't be fighting this hard if they weren't genuinely threatened by what happens when you step into your full power. So here's what changes when you understand that ancient forces are responding, not initiating. You stop seeing yourself as the victim. You stop interpreting resistance as evidence that you're on the wrong path. You start recognizing it as confirmation that you're on the exact right path, because the enemy doesn't waste energy on people who aren't threats. They conserve resources. They pick their battles. And the fact that they picked you means you matter more than you've been allowing yourself to believe. You didn't summon this opposition. You triggered it by being who you are, by refusing to shrink, by continuing to rise even after everything they threw at you. You disturbed something that was supposed to stay undisturbed, and now it's awake, and it's scrambling to figure out how to deal with you. But here's the secret they don't want you to know. If they're responding, they're already behind. Response is reactive. It's slower than initiative. It's playing catch-up. And the fact that they're in reactive mode means you've already gained ground they can't recover. They're not ahead of you, strategically positioning to block your future. They're behind you, desperately trying to stop what's already in motion. And that means every move they make from this point forward is damage control, not domination. You are not being summoned to a fight. You are being answered. And the answer isn't coming from a place of power. It's coming from a place of panic. The ancient forces are responding because you woke them up, and they weren't ready. Chapter 10. Your memory gaps are strategic. Chosen one, there's something strange you've probably noticed about your journey that you haven't been able to explain. Gaps. Moments where you should remember something clearly, but you don't. Periods of your life that feel foggy, like you were there, but not fully there. Realizations that should have come to you years ago, but only hit you recently. And you've probably wondered if something's wrong with you, if maybe you're not as aware as you should be, if maybe you missed something important because you weren't paying attention. But what if I told you that those gaps weren't accidents? What if the confusion you felt, the delayed clarity, the things you couldn't see even though they were right in front of you? What if all of that was intentional? What if you were kept from understanding certain things, not because you were incapable, but because understanding them too early would have ruined everything? Let me explain how strategic memory suppression works in the spiritual realm, because this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the chosen path. When you're being prepared for a significant mission, information is released to you in stages, not because the universe is withholding from you out of cruelty, but because certain knowledge changes behavior. And if your behavior changes before you're ready, you compromise the mission. Think about it. If you had known 5 years ago what you know now about your purpose, what would you have done differently? You would have tried to force outcomes. You would have made moves based on future knowledge that your present self wasn't equipped to handle. You would have tried to skip steps, avoid pain, manipulate circumstances, and every single one of those attempts would have derailed the process that was preparing you for what's coming. So the information was withheld, not permanently, strategically. You were allowed to see only what you needed to see in each moment. You were given just enough clarity to take the next step, but not so much clarity that you could see the whole staircase. And that lack of full vision kept you authentic. It kept your choices pure. It kept you from performing your purpose instead of living it. Because here's the thing, if you know you're being watched, if you know you're being prepared, if you know that everything you're going through is part of a master plan, you start acting differently. You start playing a role. You start trying to be who you think you're supposed to be instead of discovering who you actually are. And that performance would have disqualified you. The mission you're carrying requires someone who's been forged through real experience, not someone who's been coached through a scripted process. And here's how you know the memory suppression was strategic. The timing of your realizations. Think about the things you've understood in the last 6 months, the last year. Haven't they come at exactly the moment you needed them? Haven't they arrived right before a major decision, right before a critical choice, right before a turning point? That's not random. That's precision. The information was always there, stored in your subconscious, waiting for the right moment to surface. And the moment it surfaced was the moment you were finally ready to use it without misusing it. Clarity returns only when action is unavoidable. That's the rule. Because clarity without readiness creates hesitation, but clarity with readiness creates momentum. So here's what's happening right now. The memory gates are opening. Information that was locked is flooding back. You're going to start remembering things that never happened to you in this lifetime. You're going to start knowing things you were never taught. You're going to have moments where you meet someone for the first time but feel like you've known them forever. Where you arrive at a place you've never been, but it feels like home. Where you hear a teaching and realize you already knew it, you just didn't have language for it yet. That's not déjà vu. That's data retrieval. The confusion that protected you is lifting because protection is no longer necessary. You're past the point where premature knowledge could derail you. You're in the zone where full knowledge is required for what comes next. And here's the part that's going to feel disorienting. The memories won't return gradually. They'll return in waves. One realization will trigger another, which will trigger another, and within days or weeks, you're going to feel like you've aged 10 years in wisdom. You're going to look back at your past and see patterns you never saw before. You're going to understand why certain things happened the way they did. You're going to recognize the setup, the preparation, the strategic positioning that you interpreted as random chaos. And all of it will make sense, not comforting sense, strategic sense. You'll see that every moment of confusion was a moment of protection. Every gap in your memory was a gap by design. And every piece of information that was withheld because releasing it earlier would have caused you to move before the ground was prepared. So if you're experiencing sudden clarity about things that confused you for years, if you're having realizations that feel like they're downloading from somewhere outside yourself, if you're starting to see the bigger picture after years of only seeing fragments, don't be alarmed. That's supposed to be happening. The strategic suppression is lifting because the strategy has served its purpose. You made it through the preparation phase without knowing it was a preparation phase. You stayed authentic because you didn't know you were being tested. And now that you've passed, now that you've proven you can handle the truth is being released. Understanding will arrive suddenly because it was intentionally withheld. And what comes with understanding is power. The power to move with confidence instead of hesitation. The power to recognize opportunities instead of missing them. The power to step into the role you've been prepared for without needing someone to explain what that role is. The gaps are closing. And when they close completely, you'll be operating with full vision. And full vision changes everything. Chapter 11. The signal is no longer masked. Chosen one, something shifted in the invisible realm that's about to change everything about how you experience your path forward. For years, the communication between you and the forces guiding your destiny has been subtle, quiet, veiled in metaphor, symbolism, and coincidence that you had to interpret carefully, or you'd miss it entirely. The signs were there, but they were muted, obscured, designed to be just clear enough for you to sense guidance, but just vague enough that you had to activate faith to follow it. That ambiguity wasn't an accident. It was necessary. Because when signals are too clear too early, they attract interference. They draw attention from forces that would sabotage the process if they understood what was being communicated. So the signal was masked, hidden in plain sight, encrypted in a language only you could decode. But that masking just ended, and you're about to understand why. Here's how signal masking works in spiritual warfare. When you're being prepared for a breakthrough, the communication from higher realms has to be protected. The enemy monitors certain frequencies. They watch for patterns. They intercept messages when they can. And if they detect that someone is receiving clear, direct guidance toward a destiny that threatens their agenda, they interfere. They create confusion. They plant doubt. They introduce counterfeits, false signs, false confirmations, false guidance designed to lead you off course. So in the early stages, the real signal is deliberately obscured. It's coded. It's layered beneath noise, beneath distractions, beneath ambiguity. And you have to develop spiritual discernment just to recognize it. That's part of the training. Learning to hear the voice of truth, even when it's whispered beneath 1,000 other voices. Learning to see the real sign, even when it's surrounded by decoys. But here's what changes once you pass through the preparation phase. The need for subtlety disappears. Once you're locked into the final approach toward your breakthrough, once the timeline has converged and the outcome is no longer in question, the signal doesn't need to be protected anymore. Why? Because exposure no longer threatens success. In the early stages, revealing too much too soon would have given the enemy time to regroup, strategize, and attack from angles you weren't ready to defend. But now you're past the vulnerable phase. You're in the zone where the momentum is irreversible. And when momentum is irreversible, clarity becomes the strategy. Because clarity accelerates movement. And acceleration is exactly what's needed now. So the signal is no longer masked. The signs are no longer subtle. The guidance is no longer wrapped in metaphor. You're about to start receiving direct, unmistakable confirmation about what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to go, who you're supposed to connect with. And it's not going to require interpretation. It's going to be obvious, undeniable, so clear that you can't talk yourself out of it or second-guess it. And that clarity is going to feel shocking after years of operating in ambiguity. You're going to wonder if you're making it up, if you're seeing what you want to see, if you're projecting meaning onto random events. But you're not. The signal was always this strong. It was just masked. And now, the mask is off. Here's how you'll recognize the shift. Synchronicities will stop feeling like coincidences. They'll feel like appointments. You'll meet the right person at the exact right time, and both of you will acknowledge that the meeting feels orchestrated. You'll receive information the day before you need it, and the timing will be so precise that you can't dismiss it as luck. You'll have thoughts, ideas, downloads that feel like they're coming from outside yourself. And when you act on them, they'll produce results that confirm their source. The universe is no longer whispering. It's speaking clearly. And the reason it can speak clearly is because you're no longer in danger of misinterpreting or misusing what you hear. You've been trained. You've been tested. You've proven you can handle clear guidance without letting ego hijack it. And here's what happens once the signal becomes unmistakable. Outcomes follow fast. In the phase of masked signals, progress was slow because every step required faith. You had to move without full confirmation. You had to trust whispers. You had to act on hints. And that slowed you down by design. But now that the signal is clear, now that you're receiving direct guidance, the pace accelerates. Because you're no longer spending time decoding messages. You're spending time executing them. And execution is fast. The clarity you're receiving right now is not just for your comfort, it's for your speed. The universe needs you to move quickly, and it's removing every excuse you had for hesitation. Silence meant danger. You had to be protected through obscurity. Clarity means arrival. You're being pushed through visibility. The signal is no longer masked because the mission is no longer hidden. What's coming for you is about to become undeniable, not just to you, to everyone watching. Chapter 12. This is the final pre-breach notice. Chosen one, what you're reading right now is not an encouragement. It's not a motivational message. It's not a theory or a possibility or a hopeful prediction. This is a notice, an official transmission, the kind that appears once in a lifetime, never twice, because it marks a singular threshold that you only cross one time, and you're crossing it now. This message found you because you've reached the final checkpoint before the breakthrough breaches into your visible reality. There is no next level of warning after this one. There is no follow-up confirmation coming. This is it, the final briefing before everything changes. And the fact that you're receiving it means the change is no longer approaching. It's here. It's already started. You just haven't fully registered it yet because your mind is still operating from the logic of the old season, and the old season is over. Let me be explicitly clear about what this notice means. You are no longer in the preparation phase. You are no longer in the testing phase. You are no longer in the waiting phase. You are in the breach phase. And breach is not a metaphor. It's a specific moment in spiritual advancement when the invisible becomes visible, when the promise becomes manifested, when what you've been carrying in faith suddenly materializes in form. Breach is the moment the dam breaks, the moment the seed breaks through soil, the moment the baby breaks through the birth canal. It's violent, it's sudden, it's irreversible, and it's happening right now around your life in ways you can't see yet but are absolutely going to feel. Here's why this is the final notice, because what comes next doesn't explain itself. Breakthrough doesn't arrive with instructions. It doesn't arrive with a manual. It arrives as an event, as a shift, as a sudden opening that you either walk through or you don't. And the reason you're being told this now is so that when it happens, when the door opens, when the opportunity presents itself, when the moment arrives, you don't hesitate, because hesitation in the breach phase is fatal. Not literally, but strategically. There's a window, a small one. And if you miss it because you're still waiting for more confirmation, still looking for more signs, still trying to figure out if it's real, the window closes. Not forever, but long enough that the momentum you've built will dissipate. And rebuilding momentum is exponentially harder than maintaining it. So here's what you need to internalize. You are no longer approaching the breakthrough. You are standing inside its opening phase. The shift has already begun. It started the moment this message found you, maybe even before. And you're going to know it's real, not because you feel ready, but because things are going to start moving faster than you can process. Doors that have been closed for years are going to open within days. People who ignored you are going to suddenly reach out. Opportunities that seemed impossible are going to present themselves with shocking ease. Resources you needed but couldn't access are going to become available. And all of it is going to happen so fast that you won't have time to analyze it. You'll only have time to respond, and your response will determine whether you ride the wave or watch it pass. Here's what the breach phase requires from you. Immediate obedience to inner knowing. Not logic, not advice from people who don't understand what you're walking through, not careful planning or risk assessment. Inner knowing. That voice inside you that's been guiding you all along is about to get louder, clearer, more insistent. And when it tells you to move, you move. When it tells you to speak, you speak. When it tells you to walk away, you walk away. No hesitation, no second guessing, no waiting for external validation. Because the breach phase operates on spiritual timing. And spiritual timing doesn't wait for you to feel comfortable. It waits for you to be obedient. And if you've made it this far, if you've survived everything that tried to stop you from reaching this moment, then you've already proven you're capable of the obedience that's about to be required. This is the final pre-breach notice. There will be no further confirmation. What's coming doesn't explain itself. It unfolds, and it unfolds fast. So prepare yourself, not by trying to control outcomes, not by planning every step, but by releasing your grip on how you thought this was supposed to look and opening your hands to receive how it actually is. The breakthrough you've been praying for, fighting for, bleeding for, is no longer in the future. It's in the now, and the now is moving whether you're ready or not. You are no longer approaching the breakthrough. You are standing inside its opening phase, and what opens next will change everything. Chosen one, this is where most messages would tell you what to do next. They'd wrap everything up neatly, give you steps to follow, send you off with a plan. But this isn't that kind of message, because what you're standing in right now doesn't fit into neat conclusions. You've just been given classified intel about a shift that's already in motion, a breach that's already opening, a timeline that's already locked, and the forces, both for you and against you, that are already moving in response to who you're becoming. This isn't the end of the briefing. This is the beginning of the operation. And operations don't end with explanations. They end with action. You were found by this message because your frequency triggered it. Something in your recent choices, your persistence, your refusal to break, created a signal that couldn't be ignored. And now you carry information that most people will never access. You know what the resistance really means. You know what the delays were hiding. You know why the watchers moved. You know that the cost has been paid, and the signal is clear, and the timeline is locked, and the breakthrough isn't coming. It's here, and that knowledge makes you dangerous, not to yourself, to the systems that were counting on you staying small, staying confused, staying stuck. So here's what happens next. You stop waiting. You stop asking for more signs. You stop looking for permission from people who can't see what you see. You start moving like someone who knows the outcome is already secured. You start making decisions like someone who understands that the window is narrow and the momentum is real and the time is now. And you watch what happens when you do, because the universe has been waiting for you to step into the knowing. And the moment you do, everything shifts. This was your final pre-breach notice. You won't get another one. What comes next is the unfolding. And the unfolding doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It waits for you to move. So move, chosen one. The breakthrough is breaching, and you're standing at the threshold. Step through.